So who is Lukas Van Ness, the Green Bay Packers' first-round pick in this year's draft? Hear from his own personal defensive line coach to give you the scouting report, what they're working on, how good can he be? His coach, Eddy McGilvra, joins me on the show, and he thinks Lukas Van Ness has a chance to be special. Our very first rookie orientation series starts right now.
You are Locked On Packers, your daily Green Bay Packers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Packers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm Peter Bukowski, and I cover the Packers for The Leap, a newsletter I would love for you to subscribe to. Follow me on Twitter, Peter_Bukowski. Follow the podcast on Twitter, Locked On Packers. Like us on Facebook. Subscribe to the podcast, iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts. Wherever you find podcasts, you will find Locked On Packers, the number one Packers podcast on the internet. And the show for fans who know what happened, they want to know why and how. As I mentioned at the top, Eddy McGilvra, who is Kenny Clark's personal coach. He was Lukas Van Ness's personal coach through the pre-draft process. Sounds like will continue to be his personal coach. They're all going to be out there again in LA this summer. So this is a person who has scouted Lukas Van Ness, who has worked personally with Lukas Van Ness and will continue to work personally with Lukas Van Ness. We went through my evaluation of Van Ness on our live show. And so I don't want to rehash the whole thing, right? Because everydayers are going to be like, why are we doing this again? We had to do this once already. And I get it, but I think it's worth just looking at where I landed in terms of the summary. We don't have to go through all the minutia, but just to give you an understanding, here is where I landed ultimately. I said, I get the theory of Lukas Van Ness. He's huge. He's incredibly straight line athletic, and there's plenty to work with. But his pass rush plan is non-existent. We're going to talk to Eddy McGilvra about that. He's not as powerful as someone his size should be consistently, and his lateral agility doesn't show up on tape. He's all projection and didn't even start at Iowa, though there's a reason for that. He's the definition of a boom or bust player. Now, I mentioned this in our Leap article that I wrote about the draft process. He's a premium position player, a position where if you want to get a good one, you have to use a first-round pick on them. And he fits the athletic profile. Terrific weight-adjusted three-cone. That is what you want as a pass rusher. 96th percentile speed score, 81st percentile agility score. He's got long arms, 69th percentile arm length. Nice. He's not even 22 years old. And what is interesting about him is he does not come from a football background necessarily. He started playing hockey. And hockey was that was what he did. That's what he played until 8th grade. And so then he started playing football in high school, ultimately helps Barrington win the school's first Final Four appearance in the state championship. Still, he was only a 3-star recruit. He was the number 21 recruit in the state of Illinois. He goes to Iowa. But at Iowa, they start by seniority. And as you'll hear from Eddy McGilvra, he played out of position. He played in 2021. Of the 462 snaps that he played, 378 of them came in the B gap, so a 3 technique or shade, and 50 of them came in the A gap. Just 34, less than 10% of his snaps in 2021 came on the edge, where he is probably going to play in the NFL. That's where the Packers are going to start him anyway. And I talked to Eddy about, okay, let him do everything. let him learn how to play more on the edge? What is the plan here? Eddy gave a very interesting answer to all of that. We'll get to that when we get to the interview. And then in 2022, he basically, he doesn't flip the number quite, but it's almost 2-1. So he plays a similar number of snaps, 478, about half the time he's playing outside the tackle. But another 155 snaps plus 19 in the A gap, but 155 in the B gap. So a third or so, he's still playing inside. Another 62 over the tackle, whether that's a 4-eye, whether that's a 5 technique. I think he will get some run as a 5 technique. So we're talking about 5 snaps a game. That's something he can do, but he played a little bit of everywhere. 74.3 pass rush grade is about the 75th percentile in this class or in the nation, but almost 81 run defense grade. That is elite. That is like top 10, 90th percentile kind of grade. That is another reason why he is very similar to Rashawn Gary, because Rashawn Gary in college was already a stout, elite level run defender. And the question was, is there more pass rush here to mine? Can he get better? Does he have the twitch? Does he have the polish? And we knew he didn't have the polish because we saw it. He had to build that essentially from the ground up. And he was able to do it, which is very impressive. But not everyone is able to do it. That is what Lukas Van Ness is working on right now. So he has that elite run defense, but interestingly, his true pass rush grade was 79.4. That's more in that 80th percentile range. And I think that tells you, okay, part of the deal at Iowa was that he's playing run to pass. It is not, let's just let our hair go on fire to try and get after the quarterback. You've got to deal with RPOs. You've got to deal with play action, and they wanted him to play discipline. He's not just on the outside trying to fly out, hunt quarterbacks, and take guys down. In fact, his pass rush win rate shows that. 18.8% pass rush win rate. That is elite. That is in that like 85th to 90th sort of percentile range. That is really good right now, and that's playing a third of his snaps out of position. So this is a player who is still learning how to be an edge player in the NFL. Now, that says right away, if the Packers need help on the defensive line, he can come in and be comfortable understanding his role. He can play a gap and a half. He can control blockers with his length. He can use his speed and his power. And even with Rashawn Gary's injury, they have Preston Smith, they have Justin Hollins, they have Kingsley Enagbare. They don't need Lukas Van Ness to come in and be right away their frontline T1A pass rusher. They just don't need him to do that. So he can sort of do the Devontae Wyatt thing, which is come along at his own pace. 10 snaps here, 15 snaps there. If there's an injury, now all of a sudden you are press gagged into duty and it is time to go be a starter. And I could see by the end of the year, you're playing some more of these penny fronts with 3 defensive linemen and 3 linebackers, 2 outside linebackers usually. You've got Rashawn Gary and Preston Smith. Well, you could line up Lukas Van Ness as a 5 tech or a 4-eye or a 3 tech in some of these different kinds of variation fronts. Penny fronts, usually you've got the nose tackle, a pair of 3 techs with shade. There's some variations of it, but he could do that on the inside, especially if they're going to play that stuff on like 2nd and long, where you want him to be able to rush the passer in a passing situation. But if they're going to try and catch you with a draw or a trap or something to try and spring something on 2nd and long, he can do that defensively. The upside of a player like this, and it was interesting, I was listening to a podcast the other day, and they kept bringing up these teams in the top 10, top 12. It was like they could have just drafted Lukas Van Ness. And it wasn't, I don't think, so much about Van Ness the player as it was Van Ness the prospect and the idea of a premium position player. You can never have too much pass rush. You can never have too many pieces on your defensive front who are versatile and can do a lot of different kinds of things. And so for the Packers, you have gone toolsy once again. You have to have a plan in place, and he has to be willing to work. Is he willing to work? Well, let's hear from the guy who knows, because he's been working with him on how to be the best version of LVN that he possibly can. Before we get to that, today's episode brought to you by our friends at Built Bar. Are you looking for a delicious snack but don't want all the sugar and the calories? Then you need the best tasting protein bar ever. That's Built. You got to try this. If you're like me, you want to make healthier snack choices, but you don't want to compromise on taste. I've got just the thing for you. Built Bars and Built Puffs. Built Bars, they're healthy. They taste amazing because they're covered in 100% real chocolate. And they come in ridiculous flavors like cookies and cream, peanut butter brownie. I had a cookies and cream puff today, in fact. It was wonderful. And you can go to built.com and get them. You can get them with your 17 grams of protein, your 130 calories only, and 4 grams of sugar. Pretty ridiculous given the way that they taste. Go to built.com and get all the specialty flavors you want. Or you can go to Walmart, go to Sam's Club, just doing your shopping and pick them up there. And when you do, let me know what you think. Joining me now, he is defensive line coach to the Stars. That's what I'm gonna go with. I like that. He is worked with Kenny Clark, Green Bay Packers, and the reason he is here today because he worked this spring with Lukas Van Ness, Eddy McGilvra, and Eddie. I'm really excited to dig in and talk to you about this because the world of private coaches fascinates me in general. So I'm really excited to get to hear about your process and all that stuff. Before you work with somebody, do they reach out to you? Do you reach out to them? Like, what is the process there? Can you walk me through that?
Yeah, it kind of, for the college guys going into the NFL, getting prepared for the NFL, that would usually be through the agency that they sign with or the independent agent that they work with specifically. I'll usually have a relationship with the guy prior to, or the agency prior to, and then they'll connect me with the player as the recruiting process is going on, pretty much as they're signing them. And then I'll get them, hand to hand for the next 8 to 10 weeks. For the veterans, though, it's a little different. For them, it's more word of mouth, reference, and sometimes even social media. Guys will reach out and try to get me out to train.
And so when you're working with these guys pre-draft, you're not training 40 and those kinds of things. You're doing strictly defensive line stuff, yes?
Yeah, strictly skill work, so position-based skill work. Yep. And
so does that mean like you get connected to Lukas Van Ness, however that happens, and then do you immediately do they send you cut-ups? Do you have to go and watch tape? What is your process there?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So once I figure out who the client is I'm going to be working with, I'll just do my own homework on them and go back and watch anywhere from 4 to 5 games of them, cut up some stuff myself, some good things, some bad things, just stuff that I can show them, present them as we watch film together. That's usually the first thing we'll do is link up and watch about, an hour or two of film. And I just kind of want to see where they're watching and what they're looking at, what keys they're picking up. And then I kind of give them some insight off of what I see myself. That way we can build some chemistry before we just go straight to the field.
Before you get to sit down with Lukas and watch his tape with him, what did you see on tape?
Out of position, compared from, he won't, I don't imagine him playing too much interior defensive line in the NFL. I think his strongest points of his game are on the edge. And, he showed that in college. I think it was a little bit of a need at Iowa where they needed him to bump down inside a lot of the time. That was one. And then, 2 was just his ability to also play out of position at a high level. He was able to play inside at 3 technique and even the shade sometimes and not, it didn't really affect his game at all. He's a very powerful player. But I think what you're going to see in the NFL compared to what you saw in college is a lot more of him in space.
And why do you think that suits his game better?
He's an athlete. He's a very underrated athlete. I think we saw it at the combine and at the pro day. He's very fast. He has a great first step off the ball, which he really didn't get to display at Iowa because of the tighter, alignments. He played the type 5 technique, the 4 technique, the 3 technique. I think in the NFL, he will be spread out in the wide 9 a lot of the time in passing situations, and he'll be able to display his power off of his first step, and he really gains a lot of ground. And then also, he's very athletic. He can bend and flatten a corner, and I don't think he got to show that at Iowa, but just again, because of the way they played him and the way their system worked. Not a shot against Iowa. They do a fabulous job with defensive linemen and everything. I just think that you're going to see a better NFL version than you saw in college, and I think that's why the Packers should be very excited.
When you're going through and watching with him, what is your impression just of like this Lukas Van Ness, the student of his own game?
You know what? That's I don't really get too deep into them, talking about their own game, because I feel like they're learning so much about themselves through the process. It's like, and a guy like Lukas, like I said, he played a lot out of position, so he didn't really. I don't even think he realized how good he was and how good he can be until we got on the field and we started showing him, like, dude, you can do this. Like, you can do these kind of things that you weren't doing at Iowa. And I think confidence will always be a pass rusher's number one weapon. The more confidence you can gain in yourself and your moves and your ability to rush the edge, you're gonna be lights out as you get better and better at that confidence factor. So I think for him it was confidence, and then also being able to play at a position that he was more suited for. And I think you're gonna see it. The process will show itself over the next couple years or so, but hopefully right away.
When you first get him on the field, I mean, you saw on tape, I mean, you can see when he converts speed to power, when he played with good leverage, he can be a bully. You don't quite get that in some of the drill work that you guys are doing. So then it's more about, let me see the raw athleticism. What did you notice on the field, like those first couple days?
Well, he's very sudden for 6'5", 275. He's so sudden. He has really long arms, strong hands at the point of attack. He's very technical with hand placement, and I think that's a big that's going to transfer for him pretty quickly to the NFL. That's a major tool that edge rushers need to have, and he has that type of package where, if he puts his hands in the right spot with the combination of his speed and power, you're going to feel him, and he's going to collapse that pocket very quickly. I think the biggest thing for him was just, understanding how to get off of those and use some counters off of his speed to power, which we worked on, a lot throughout the process, and he's only going to get better at it.
Yeah, that was something I was going to ask you about, because I would watch him, and it was like he could create movement against these blockers, but then it was like, okay, how do I get to that next place where now I'm either around or through them, discarding them, shedding those blocks, and getting to the ball carrier? So what are the kinds of things you can do to drill that stuff?
It's really just repetition, like at the point of attack. So we'll use, like, me, for example, I'll replicate an offensive lineman. Not the best at this age and broken down, but I try my best. And, we just rep it at a slower tempo. I think the biggest thing I teach guys when it comes to mentally slowing things down and almost walk through style, jog through style on the reps, is that, the brain and the mind, it doesn't really know the difference when you go from walk through to full speed. It's able to create muscle memory, and if you can do those small things and rep those small things at the point of attack, whether it's escaping at the top of the rush, ripping at the top of the rush, you're creating muscle memory. And as long as you're doing the right things and creating good habits, when it comes down to that full speed rep, your body's just going to naturally know what to do.
All right, we're going to get to more with Eddy in just a second. Thanks for making Locked On Packers your first listen every day. Everydayers, tomorrow on the show, we're going to talk about this roster, where it stands, and how much worse or better it has really gotten given the losses that this team incurred. Plus, is a youth movement in order? We're going to talk about all of that on tomorrow's show. All right, back to our interview. He is someone who at 6'5", you would, like, in a vacuum, you'd worry about leverage. When you watch him play, you kind of don't. Like, he consistently plays with really good leverage, which is kind of wild. So it seems like, okay, he can be a power rusher. He can run through your face. If you were going to try and say, okay, in a perfect world, if I could just wave my magic wand and give you the perfect counter, what is the counter that you would give Lukas?
He has it. He has it, Peter. I don't want to give that away.
Okay.
Because, he has it, and you're going to see it very quickly when he gets to camp. They put the pads on you. I'm telling you right now, Lukas Van Ness has the ability to be Rookie of the Year. I'm not even hyping him up. I said it the first day, the first day I got off the field with him, very first day, his agent asked me, hey, what do you think? And I just told him straight up, I was like, this kid's going to be one of the best players in the NFL one day. Like he has that ability. I just don't think, I think people could say what they want about when he was at Iowa not starting. Like, the truth is that people that know, you know what I mean? And that's enough. And Lukas knows that. So, but I'm going to tell you, you're going to see it early. Him and Rashawn Gary, when he gets back, they're very similar.
Yeah.
To what they do at the point of attack off their rushes. It's going to push the pocket. And then, don't get me excited for KC because, that's really what we needed. I mean, we they worked out together throughout the process for about a month. And, Kenny will tell you, he saw it too. So, I'm not the only one hyping up my guy. I'm pretty biased when it comes to my guys, but at the end of the day, I've seen it before, and I see it in Lukas for sure.
And just so like the listener knows, before the Packers drafted him, we're talking about pre-combine. You texted me and I asked you, I was like, so who are you working with? What are you guys doing pre-draft? And you said, this kid, Lukas Van Ness, is an absolute monster and he's going to blow up the combine. And so that was before he was a Packers player. You were telling me this kid is got some special ability. One thing that I think we are really bad at evaluating through the process, and one thing that I think is when you get a really talented kid who fails, it's because they're not able to deal with adversity. They're not able to deal with early struggles and those kinds of things. I know that you have a very limited experience set with him, but as you're talking about, he's playing out of position at Iowa. He's not going to be playing a lot of 3-tech and those kinds of things. Like it sounds like, and correct me if I'm wrong, that there was no excuse. He was just like, I need to get better. I need to do whatever this other thing is so that I can be the best version of myself. There wasn't a lot of like, yeah, well, they didn't know. You said he literally didn't know, rather than him saying they didn't know. And that seems like a big difference to me.
Yeah, you're spot on. Lukas is never going to be the type of person throughout his career to complain and point fingers. He's going to do what the team needs him to do. He's a winner. You know what I mean? He wants to win more than anything else. And, that goes individual goals and goes for the team as well. But, Lukas is going to be the type of player too on that defensive front that he'll sacrifice a lot of his wins for other guys to get open and get their one-on-ones. And even if that means him bumping down to a 3 technique and sub packages next to Kenny and, having 9-1 and Rashawn on the other side and going to work. And I think he's going to do whatever it takes and whatever the coach has asked him. And he proved that at Iowa. And it's not going to affect his game. He's just going to get his head down and work because that's all he knows how to do.
You mentioned the relationship that you see in the games between Rashawn Gary and Lukas Van Ness. And that was one of the things I talked about on our show immediately after. The difference between Rashawn Gary at Michigan, where he is taking on, 2 blockers consistently. He's playing 4 high at Michigan. And it's like, that's not what they're going to ask him to do at the NFL. You widen him out, let him build up some speed, and now go bully offensive linemen. Can you just give me a little insight into how that can change for a defensive player? Like the difference between playing 3-tech and the runway that gives you as a pass rusher versus playing that wide 9.
Well, the 3-tech, it all happens so quickly, right? Everything's like almost right away. You don't really have a lot of time to build up momentum or work an inside-outside track. And, when you get yourself in those wider alignments, like a 7 technique or a wide 9, you're able to really gain momentum. And if you use leverage correctly with your hand placement and you have the type of power and extension that you can get to one arm, like Lukas or like Rashawn, like you see Rashawn's number 1 rush is that speed to power. He uses his inside arm extremely well. The hand placement is automatic, and he's able to use a lot of counters off of that. And I think that's what you're going to see in Lukas right away is that when you split him out like that, he has the ability to go speed to power and work, inside, outside, or through you if necessary. And it's going to collapse the pocket very quickly. And it's going to put a lot of pressure on tackles. It's going to put a lot of pressure on running backs to chip. And Lukas is only going to get better. The more reps he sees is going to be so valuable for him.
I know this is not really in your wheelhouse, but I just think, like, as a coach, you have some understanding of how he's learning and those kinds of things. I worry sometimes coaches want to put too much on a rookie's plate. They get really excited about a player and they go, we think he can do everything for us. And then they try and let him do everything. And it kind of overloads them and they're not able to focus on one thing. If Matt LaFleur called and said, hey, Eddie, should we just let him learn how to be a professional outside linebacker, professional edge player, or should we try him doing these other things too? What would you say?
I would say throw everything at him and see what sticks, because I just don't think he's a finished product at all. I think that Lukas eventually could be a really, really good interior player. But I do think that in the beginning, and I think that, as far as his career goes, I think he's better suited on the edge. But I have full faith in Joe Barry and that group of coaches to, put him in the best places to be successful. And he has a great room. He's with a great room with some great veterans and some younger guys that were there last year that can help him out throughout the beginning of his process. I know him and Kenny are already in contact, and I know Kenny's going to be a big guy for him to lean on and just figure out the ins and outs of that franchise and that facility and just the Green Bay area in general. I think the more comfortable he gets in his environment, the more you're going to see him be himself.
Can you let me know how is Kenny gonna, what else is left for Kenny Clark? I can't let you go without asking you a Kenny Clark question. Like, what is there left for him to unlock?
We're chasing, and the individual goals are there. Him and I have talked about it. We think that he left some money on the table last year. It was a tough season. He was very open about that. And, we just went right back to work, and he finished the season healthy, which, I can't stress enough. That's so crucial for his offseason development. Again, he's young, he's growing, he wants it. He's not bored. He's not
It's
satisfied.
Crazy how young he still is. It's wild.
He needs more. He wants to win a championship, and, he wants to be all pro. He wants to get those Pro Bowl. He wants to touch high sack numbers. 10 is the goal every year. And I think, he's right there. I just think, there's a couple things to clean up, which we're working on, and adding pieces like Lukas are so valuable because you're able to, take some attention away or collapse a pocket for a guy like Kenny who can get to the quarterback extremely quickly off the ball. So I think the best is ahead for both of those guys. And I believe, again, once the summer hits, they'll be together out here in Los Angeles.
Well, I appreciate you offering some insight. Appreciate the work that you're doing. It's really fun. People should go follow Eddie on Twitter. He's always posting videos, a lot of Kenny Clark stuff. There's some Lukas Van Ness stuff out there from some of the work that you guys have done. So go check that out. And I appreciate your time. Thanks, Eddie. All right. Thanks to Eddie for joining the show. Always great to talk to him. Kenny Clark, little update there. Lukas Van Ness info. Look, I'm telling you, and I didn't say this on the show at the time, but before we knew the Packers were even interested in Lukas Van Ness, he texted me pre-combine and said, this guy is unbelievable. And I was like, no, I believe it. Now the tape is not there, but I think he gives really important context to why that is, playing out of position and still learning to play the position, but with the physical tools and the want to and all of the attributes that you want. Remember what Mike Smith said about Rashawn Gary, that give me someone with the physical tools and the drive to be great, and I can turn him into a great player. That is what coaching is. And that is the project that they have undertaken with Lukas Van Ness. This is a player who, according to his personal coach, and yes, he admitted he was biased, he said he thinks Lukas Van Ness can be one of the best defensive players in football. And thought that from basically the jump. That's pretty high praise. That is pretty high praise. And this is someone who was working with Nolan Smith in the pre-draft process. Brian Brzee, former 5-star at Clemson, in the pre-draft process, has worked with some of the best football players in the NFL at the position, and he saw LVN and was like, this guy is different. And that's the Packers' first round pick. All right, a lot more to come on the Packers rookie orientation series. They've got a lot of picks to talk about. We're going to talk about as many as we can over the next couple months. We're also going to launch a new series. And we are going to go back in time. I know I get pegged as the Aaron Rodgers hater, but we're going to go back and do entire shows dedicated to some all-time great Aaron Rodgers moments. The Dallas Cowboy game. Man. Some Bears moments, to be sure, are going to be in there. And some of the lower moments, some of the losses. We're going to get all of it, the iconic Aaron Rodgers moments. We are going to go into the history, pay homage, and have a really fun time this offseason. If there's a moment, I saw Matt Steinman did a piece on this. And so a lot of you offered him suggestions. We already have some of these set up in terms of the interviews that we're lining up for them and getting scheduled. So some really fun episodes that I cannot wait for you guys to listen to are coming up here in the next couple months. Follow me on Twitter, Peter_Bukowski. Follow the podcast on Twitter, Locked On Packers. Like us on Facebook. Subscribe to the podcast, iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts, wherever you find podcasts, you will find Locked On Packers. And anytime you want to come hang out with us live, when we go live on our Locked On Packers YouTube page, you can do that. Subscribe on YouTube so you can stay Locked On Packers.